Welcome everyone to the LTH product briefing. We are thrilled today to have with us Jodie Baker of Xakia. Welcome, Jodie.
Thanks for having me, Nikki.
Jodie, tell us a little bit about Xakia, including how long it's been around as a solution.
We kicked off in 2016, so we've now been around for 7 years. We had an MVP initially and then rebuilt the software and launched that at the beginning of 2019. So it's about 4.5 years old now.
How did it come to be? You're the founder. How did you end up founding Xakia, and where did the idea come from?
So my first startup was a virtual law firm here in Australia. And when I was working there at Hive Legal, I noticed that our clients often had a pain point around visibility, who was working on what and for whom. So I started to investigate that a little bit more and ran a mini research project, if you like, to understand that pain point across teams, specifically of 2 to 20 lawyers in the legal team, and really identified pain point to be one of visibility, but also moving on to how the legal teams were communicating with their stakeholders about what they were doing and how they could identify opportunities for productivity improvements. So we started to develop an idea around a technology solution that was easy and accessible and affordable. Smallish teams, of course, don't have big budgets or even a lot of bandwidth to implement software. So it was really important to us that we kept it pretty light for adoption purposes. And so we started to prototype that and got some really good feedback and then spun it out and kicked off in 2016.
Fantastic. You've spoken about the fact that really you were recognizing a gap in the market and Xakia was built in order to address that. But can you talk a bit about what problems Xakia predominantly solves now for teams?
Xakia is a legal matter management solution at its core. It's about tracking the work, but the problems or work process that legal teams have encompasses many things. So it's how does the work come in from the business? How do the requests come in? How do we track that information and then collaborate and communicate with those requesters so that they don't feel like they're working with a black box? How do we engage our external counsel, whether that's for invoice purposes or otherwise? So making sure that we've got those communication portals through to our specific stakeholders for matters. So those three, tracking the work through matter management, intake and spend, are often the drivers that we have for organizations to come into us and help solve those problems. Of course, through that process, you capture lots of information and data about how you can improve those processes. So we also have automation tools that help to speed up those processes and make sure that teams are as efficient and effective as they possibly can be. There are other ancillary things like contract management and dispute management, and even just capturing information about all of the different information that you might have, like leases and IP filings and anything that might be captured in an Excel spreadsheet today. All of those things can be captured in Xakia. So we solve a myriad of problems really for in-house legal teams.
Excellent. Let's get into it.
Sure. Let me share my screen. Excellent. Can you see that, Nikki?
Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay. So as I said, Xakia is at its core a matter management system. We track the work that is being done so that you've got beautiful visibility around who is working on what and for whom. Here works on a highly configurable philosophy. So you've got lots of capacity to determine which columns you want to display in your list here. You can, of course, move them around so that you're displaying them in whichever order you like. Everything here is able to be filtered so that you can see the work that's being done by a particular member of the team. This sort of visibility, Nikki, is really what we originally wanted to solve for. Who is working on what and for whom? What are the deadlines? How important is it? You can see that we've got this prioritization here. It just gives a really clear and quick ability to look at all of the work that's needing to be addressed first so that teams are spending their time where it will have the most impact. However, not everybody wants to work in a list view. We have had a lot of requests over the years for a more agile way of working, and we have a card view here, which is very much around the move towards agile and thinking about how you can make the most of your day, how you can be as productive as you possibly can. Xakia works in 3 different categories of items in this board here. So you can have matters, which have this blue line here, tasks, which are a subset of a matter, which have the yellow line and not showing on the screen, but we also have key dates. So if you have, for example, court dates and what have you, you can set those up so that they'll display here as well.
Interesting. You could customize this. So if you are the user, you could see just your tasks or the tasks and that pertain to other people on your team as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I can come in here and I can see all of my critical matters first, and then I can work backwards if I need to do that. Everybody has a different preference on that. For the demo purposes, this is the one that I've set up today. So it just gives you the ability to see straight away what you've got in progress. This is all very drag and drop, and you've got the capacity here to sort by date or by priority. So you can see the things that are required first up at the top and things that are all critical priority or whatever it might be. So lots of ability to change dates or favorite your matter, add a discussion, etc., right from that screen. So it becomes your central go-to.
And how do matters get in here? Would you start them here? Or if you're a team getting started, how do you, oh, I see a new matter up there.
There's actually a number of different ways that matters come into the system. So I can show you what that looks like. It's a very quick process. Usually you set up some templates at the very beginning so that you've got all of that here. Once the templates have been set up, you just click on that template, you fill in this information, and you would usually, have something a little bit unique about this. But if it's a repetitive matter, you are literally just coming in, clicking save, and you're done, right? Like it's a very quick process. But there are other ways of getting to creating a matter. So a legal request coming in from the business, for example, it gets triaged, assigned to somebody, it's automatically created as a matter. You can do it straight out of your Outlook or your email. We have integrations with a number of different systems. Sometimes people have some other enterprise type system that exists and is creating a request from the business. Salesforce, for example, so you can create those sort of requests coming through and they just go through as a matter, or you might use an automation tool like Joseph Checkbox, those sorts of things, and they can be embedded in our internal client portal so that they can then automatically create a request. So there's a number of different pathways to get to that point.
And once you create a matter, you showed, I thought it was really neat how you can fold tasks in under a matter.
Yeah.
Set up a template so a specific type of matter always has certain tasks.
Correct. Yeah. And then the way that you set that up, of course, is that particularly for litigations or things that have a very set process, you set them up in order. So they have dates from the date that the matter was created, plus 5 days, plus 10 days, plus etc. So you can set them out where there's a process and then they can be adjusted from there. And once the matter's been established, there's usually some variation on the theme, but it's a nice, clear, quick way of creating all of those tasks there. So I might just jump into a matter. This is our demo matter. So it's a big complex matter that's been running for 4 years because it's got all of the data in it that we've ever captured. But this is essentially a matter that's got a good amount of information. So we track things like, obviously, what the status of the matter is, the date that it was received and when it's required, who the work is for, so who your client is internally, who is doing the work. So that's a combination of your internal team, who might be split into groups if you've got a larger in-house legal team, and then what your resourcing options are. So for this one here, we've got external resources on here. You've got those combinations. On a new matter, you would also have the options of internal only, automation in full, or automation in part, so that you can track those requests that might come through that are completely self-serve for the business. So you're not even touching them, but you've got a record there, or those that have been automated so that you've got the ability to understand those pieces where automation investment has been worthwhile for you. And then, of course, what work is involved here. So that's just not just a categorization of the work, but also I'll just point out these here. So complexity of the work and strategic value goes to that point that we were talking about earlier, Nikki, being able to communicate the value of the legal team and identify those opportunities for productivity improvement. And you can see here that we've got hover text here, which is configurable by the user to help ensure that there's consistency amongst the team around how they're rating things. But this allows us to look at the strategic impact of that work. I'll just quickly, before we go into the analytics, I will just quickly, while we're here, point out that we have spend management. And so we have the ability to capture key information here about the engagement with a law firm. We can implement billing guidelines, put assessment metrics in place. And then, of course, we have the ability to receive invoices and put those through an approval workflow as well. So that can be set up to, or any other workflows that need to be put in place for invoices of a certain amount or from a certain firm and so on. And then, of course, you can track all of your costs across all of your firms here so that you can make sure that you stay within budget. And that, of course, has certain limitations to it. If you're over budget, you can set up things that restrict the submission of invoices by your law firms if need be, or not, depending on what you want. So I think I'm going to move away from that and have a look at analytics, Nikki, unless there was anything else you wanted to touch on.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do. One question I had, the strategic, I really like the fact that you're able to assess something as having a particular strategic value. Does that then go to priority, or does that go
Good question.
to the way that the analytics work? You may be showing us that now.
Yeah, I am showing you that. So it doesn't go, no, there's a field there that is actually priority. So you can actually label that field priority or risk. So again, configuration over customization, but that feeds through to a number of different things in the workflow and the way that it's presented in your system. But no, the strategic value and priority are different fields, but they can be matched together so that you can look at them as a combination. The analytic for complexity and strategy actually come through on what we call the Xakia quadrant. So complexity is tracked here on the y-axis and the strategic value on the x-axis here. We apply a point system based on size. So usually, not every time, but usually in-house legal teams don't want to time record, but there is some value in understanding how big or small a matter is. So we capture t-shirt sizes. I don't know if you noticed, but there was a size field on the matter form, and we just use t-shirt sizes, extra small through to extra large. And then we apply a point system to that. So we say, let's give a weighting to an extra small matter that's very different to an extra large matter. And then we apply it here. How much work, how much time or weighting of resources are being applied to complex strategic matters or non-complex, non-strategic matters, and then of course a combination of the two. So that gives us a really clear way of saying, where are we putting our time and effort? Is there an opportunity to eliminate, outsource, make sure that we're using the right internal resources, training up certain members of our team so that they can then move into more complex and strategically valuable work? But it identifies that work. So I can then have a look at this, but we run all sorts of different reports around this sort of stuff, but I can have a look at this and I can say, okay, now I understand what that work is and how I can address that to optimize my legal team.
Yeah.
That's on that side. On the other side is, hey, CEO, have a look at the fantastic work that we're doing and how much effort we're putting into the strategically valuable work.
It would really allow you to be smarter about resourcing, I imagine. So if you're looking at it and seeing a number of your staff are really busy on things that might be automated, for example, or that could be self-serve, and then you can move them into more strategic, complex matters, you're doing so much more with your team.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, optimizing your resource allocation is really what the analytics are about. Ultimately, for any analytics, it's about making sure that you're getting the most out of your team, identifying risks and making sure that they're being addressed. But this is a really critical component of this. You can look at it as an individual set of matters as well. So I can come in and I can understand these pieces of work individually, but really for resource decisions, that collective piece is really the critical component. Our dashboards generally are very configurable. So I can come in and I can have a look at, say, the categorization of work instead of the departments, and I can do that in each one of these widgets. I have the capacity to look at this as a bar chart, a pie chart. I can focus on, I personally like the stacked chart. I can focus on it by any of these metrics. So I can stack it by size or resourcing or what have you. So I've got lots of freedom to build out this dashboard as I see fit, including this little list of matters down the bottom here. I can choose the columns that I want to display so that I can come in and of course then jump into each of those matters as appropriate. So lots of capacity. Each one of these is filterable, so I can filter out each of these bars to just have a look at those things, and then of course apply additional filters here if I want to do that. So I can come in and I can say, actually, I want to see a particular thing and filter it down in a different way. So lots of capacity to do that through our dashboards, and there are a ton of dashboards. So you can imagine around spend, we want to see all sorts of different things, but we also have one of my favorites, which is our reports, because often what you want to do is actually communicate to other people in your organization or even to yourself as a legal leadership team what it is that you're doing, who you're doing it for. There's so many fantastic stories about teams that have really improved the communication internally with their stakeholders around the work that's being done by the legal team. Lots of capacity here to choose a report, configure it, run it, set it up as a recurring report that gets delivered to you or to one of your stakeholders. So lots of really fun stuff here. There's just a couple that I ran earlier. So you can set up something like a concise matters list that just has lots of word information. These are the pieces that are being done. You might filter this just for critical type matters that are of strategic value or what have you. And then, of course, things that are much more visual in their communication. So things like a short executive summary that is just a one-pager summarizes the work that's been done or being done, and then of course gives a visual depiction of that work so that you understand things like turnaround time or how the work has changed from one period to another. Fantastic for being able to put a business case together for, we need more lawyers in our team, of course, which is just a really important and difficult thing for teams to be able to communicate. There is a bunch of reports here that are very, very popular. So things like understanding how your internal resources are being used. So this will just give you this is just a summary so that you can understand what that report is before you run it. But essentially it's doing things like looking at individual team members, understanding their profile so that you can help to identify where the opportunities are for training them in the right areas or moving their attention to things that are spot on in their sweet spot so that you're utilising each one of your team members to the best of their ability and making sure that you're using those resources appropriately. Things like this analysis report, all of these are incredibly configurable. So you've got the capacity to say, I just want to have a look at this, for example, for a particular business unit, or I just want to have a look at it for a particular category of work or any of those sorts of things. The work that was there at the beginning of the period came in, got completed and left at the end, how it gets broken down, how it's moved over the period of time. So just a ton of stuff. And that's it. I think that I've probably given you the most whirlwind tour of all time. So hopefully nobody's feeling.
Brilliant. You know, it just really strikes me the visibility that they would suddenly have over their matters is quite extraordinary. And apart from that, it is also really lovely to look at. It's very clean. Jodie, thank you so much for showing us this. For those watching, we will put a URL along the bottom so you can find Xakia and look out for our written interview with Jodie as well with some more contact information. But thanks again so much for joining us and showing us Xakia today.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks everyone for watching the LTH product briefing.